Welcome to Dates and Dead Guys. What I do here is I take a look at stories from history that I find interesting and try to explain them to people the way that I would to my friends. If this is the kind of thing that you like to listen to, please subscribe and leave a like on my channel. It helps me out a lot. But let's get into today's story. When I think about a lot of Native Americans and the ones that stick out historically, I think that a disproportionate number are Lakota. I think of names like Red Cloud, Sitting Bull, Black Elk, and Crazy Horse. Those are iconic names that are legendary from the Native American wars that took place in the 1870s. There are, of course, a ton of other famous Native Americans. Everyone knows Squanto and Pocahontas and Sacagawea. If you're a sports fan, you're probably yelling Jim Thorpe. But for me, the Lakota stick out, and Crazy Horse in particular. I think that a big reason why Crazy Horse sticks out to me is just because of his name. He would be famous anyway, but his name really sets him apart and sets the tone for who he is as a person. That today is the story I really want to tell you. How Crazy Horse earned his name.
The Lakota had an interesting custom as a tribe. It wasn't rare that as an adult you would get a different name from when you were a child. And for a lot of families it was kind of like a rite of passage. Kind of like today with confirmation of the Catholic Church, but with less killing. At least in the modern day, I think. They do sometimes cover things up. It's not known exactly, but Crazy Horse was born probably between 1840 and 1842. They don't know for sure because no one wrote it down. But apparently it's around the same time that Lakota stole a bunch of horses, and someone wrote that down, and that was around 1840 or so. He was actually named Among the Trees, but because he had unusually light hair and skin for Lakota, his mother would take to calling him Light Hair or Curly, and those nicknames stuck. I actually really liked this choice by his mother. Brown hair was rare, especially for Lakota men. Knowing that he was going to be teased, she addressed the elephant in the room. She put it out in the open for everyone, and he had to own it.
Most sources actually refer to him as Curly and not Light Hair, but the chief resource that I had for this episode is a book called The Journey of Crazy Horse by Joseph M. Marshall III. He himself is a Lakota man, and because it's the chief resource, I'm going to defer to him.
Tragically, Lighthair's mother dies when he's about 4. His father does remarry, and polygamy wasn't uncommon among the Lakota, so at least on the bright side, Lighthair does get a few new moms. Lighthair's father was not a warrior. He was a medicine man. His name was actually Crazy Horse, and for most of this video, I'll refer to him as the Elder Crazy Horse to avoid any confusion. His father, before him, was also named Crazy Horse, as it was a family name, like Johnson or Smith, but not Lane. As a medicine man, Lighthair's father didn't go on raids and war parties like the other men, but those things would be the way for Lighthair. At just 4 years old, Lighthair was given a bow, and he immediately took to it, and by age 12, he was already a proficient hunter. It's not a surprise that native groups like the Lakota were so proficient on bows and on horseback. A lot of their childhood games were built around those skills. By the time Lighthair was 12, shooting an arrow through a rolling hoop was easy, and he moved on to trying to hit more difficult things, like grasshoppers as he would walk through fields. And as a kid, one of Lighthair's best friends was a guy named Lone Bear. They would play games like knocking them off horses, which is exactly what it sounds like. The boys would just knock each other off horses. But their favorite game was called Buffalo Chase. Buffalo Chase is when one boy on horseback is the buffalo. He takes off, and the other boy, the hunter, chases on horseback with the goal of shooting him with a blunted arrow. Lakota boys, I'm pretty sure, bled a lot. Also not a good time to mess up what arrow you're using, and probably a lot of trust in that game. Luckily, as a growing boy, he also had a mentor, High Backbone or Hump. As far as I can tell, the name is in reference to a buffalo and isn't pointing out some sort of horrible scoliosis or something. There are not a lot of pictures of Hump, but he doesn't look like Quasimodo. Hump was a war chief. He was also likely Lighthair's uncle, the brother to his deceased mother. Hump would take him under his wing and, in a lot of cases, show him how to become a great warrior. He thought Lighthair was special. The boy was quiet and shy, and he thought something set him apart. Black Elk, the famous Lakota medicine man, said of their relationship, quote, "Hump was a very great warrior, maybe the greatest we ever had until then. They say people used to wonder at the boy and the old man always being together, but I think Hump knew Crazy Horse would be a great man and wanted to teach him everything." End quote. His friends saw it too. Lighthair had another friend called He Dog, and he and Lone Bear would follow him everywhere. Lighthair was quiet, but a leader, and he usually won in their games. Marshall writes, in The Journey of Crazy Horse, describing him, quote, "He was not always the fastest or the quickest or the best shot, but he simply kept trying. And although he didn't tell them what to do, they still followed him because he didn't hesitate to take the lead. He seemed to know instinctively the best trail to follow or the best way to do something." End quote. Things changed drastically for the Lakota in 1854. Oddly enough, because of a freaking cow. Light Hair was an Oglala Lakota, but the neighboring group is called the Brule. There were several different bands. These Lakota kill an old cow belonging to a white settler traveling west. It had wandered unattended into their camp. Soldiers from nearby Fort Laramie wanted the cow killer punished and sent a small force of about 30 soldiers to the tribe. The Lakota chief, Conquering Bear, tried to be reasonable. He offered 2 horses in exchange for the cow, but the officer, John Groton, wasn't having it. To make matters worse, they had brought a very drunk translator that hated the Lakota. It's possible that he lied on some of the translations. Regardless, negotiations break down. The American soldiers fire on the Lakota, fatally injuring Conquering Bear, but the soldiers are hilariously outnumbered, and all 30 men are slaughtered before any of them could make it back to Fort Laramie.
Light Hair was actually present at the battle, as were a fair amount of Oglala. They had come to back up the Brule since they were both Lakota, and there was a fair amount of familiarity there. I can't say for sure how common it was, but I do know for a fact that there were a fair amount of instances where young Lakota would stand by and effectively watch a battle when they thought something was going to go down. In Black Elk Speaks, there's actually a story where in one of the battles when the Lakota would kill some of their enemies, children would run out onto the battlefield and scalp the injured. There was Native American practice where it wasn't just important to be the one who killed someone, but being the first to touch him on the battlefield gave you a fair amount of respect. And the scalp was, of course, a trophy. The kids would take the scalp, show it to their mom. She would be all proud of him and hang it on the fridge.
He's a little young then, but his age at this part of the story does make him fit very well into the upcoming action. The cow incident, actually called the Groton Massacre or the Groton Battle, is going to kick off a lot of violence between the U.S. and Lakota, and it's going to last the better part of 25 years. With breaks and treaties, but manifest destiny is a bitch, and there's gold out there in those mountains. Where he really starts to show that he's ready to take a greater part in his tribe is in the aftermath of the Battle of Ash Hollow in 1855. U.S. General William Harney came to Lakota territory demanding the men responsible for the previous Groton Massacre cow fiasco be brought to justice. The Lakota explained that they were shot first and refused to give up anybody. Most of the men were away hunting, and Harney's men killed over 80 Lakota and captured another 70, mostly women and children. To make matters worse, the dead were mutilated, weird things like cut off breasts and scalps taken from pubic hair. From this point on, Harney would be known to the Lakota as woman killer, or butcher. Light Hair was among the first to find the scene. It was pretty clear to him what happened. Military horses wear metal shoes, pretty easy for a skilled Lakota tracker to follow. But as he does, he has to abandon his task because he comes across an injured Sahila woman who needed help. Her husband and baby had just been murdered by the troops, and Light Hair makes it a point to get her back to Spotted Tail's camp. When Light Hair returned to the Oglala camp, he never spoke about saving the woman. But word got around, and those in his camp respected what he did for her. This incident marked additional changes in Light Hair. He became quieter, and it was growing obvious that his patience for the Americans was growing shorter. Shortly after Harney's attack, Light Hair went on a vision quest. For Lakota, vision quests usually had some common characteristics, like fasting, isolation, and prayer were the most common 3. They probably would have added DMT, but I don't think they listened to Joe Rogan. Light Hair had gone out alone for 2 nights on a sandstone bluff, and it came to him. He saw lightning on his face and blue hailstones on his chest. Thunder and lightning from a rolling cloud were behind him. A red-tailed hawk flew above him as bullets and arrows filled the air all around him, but none hit him. Before his vision ended, his own people rose from the ground and would pull him down off his horse. The vision itself was heard by all those around. Light Hair's father, the elder Crazy Horse, recognized that the vision made Light Hair a thunder dreamer. So what is a thunder dreamer? I have seen it described as a heyoka, or sacred clown, but in a positive sense. Thunder dreamers had great power and were often leaders, but they also must do the opposite of what's expected. In Black Elk Speaks, Light Hair, as an adult, is referred to a few times as a queer man. It was written in the 1930s. They mean weird, but it makes sense. Weird people often do the opposite of what you would expect. They are contrarians. The book also says, quote, "He would go about the village without noticing people or saying anything. In his own teepee he would joke, and when he was on a warpath with a small party, he would joke, to make his warriors feel good. But around the village, he hardly ever noticed anybody, except little children. All the Lakotas liked to dance and sing, but he never joined the dance, and they say nobody ever heard him sing. But everybody liked him, and they would do anything he wanted or go anywhere he said. End quote. Thunder Dreamers must also take the path of humility, so boasting or drawing attention to himself would have been avoided. The Lakota believed that if Lighthair lived up to the requirements of a Thunder Dreamer, he was protected. Bullets and arrows could not hurt him, unless, as seen in the end of his vision, he was pulled down by his own people. After the vision, the Lakota wanted to know if Lighthair was actually protected. Hump invited him on a raid into Shoshone or Snake Country. They didn't find any snakes, but they do find another group to raid. They didn't know who they were, but it worked just as well. I mean, they did make the trip. When you're on the warpath, you've got to raid somebody. Lighthair is painted as he saw in his vision. Red lightning down the side of his face and hailstones on his chest. A single falcon feather in his hair, pointed down like they do for attack. Before the Lakota can attack, they are discovered by the other party, who quickly entrench themselves behind rocks from a protected position in the hillside. There are only 4 of them, but it's risky to attack an entrenched enemy. The Lakota only have a small party themselves. It's Lighthair, Hump, and a few others. From the high ground and cover, their enemies have an advantage, but this is a chance to see if Lighthair is truly protected. Hump calls for the group to charge up the hill. Lighthair has a 6-shooter in his belt and a quiver around his waist. In his right hand he has a bow, 2 arrows in his left hand and another in his teeth. He is in front, charging up the hillside. He feels the air off the musket balls as they hurl past his head a split second before he even hears the crack of the rifles. Before he can reach the enemy, Lighthair has his horse shot out from under him. He gets up, but he's lost his bow. In the chaos, another horse, possibly one that they meant to rope off down the hill, was running in the direction of Lighthair. He grabs the mane and swings on its back as the panicked horse takes him in among the rocks where the enemy is entrenched. Lighthair grabs the pistol from his belt and fires at one of the men. The man is forced to dive for cover as his 3 partners stop firing on the Lakota and turn their attention to Lighthair. Each take a shot, but no one hits him. Lighthair gains control of his horse and rides down the hill. He recovers his bow and makes a second charge up the hill with Hump. This time, when he reaches the rocks, he puts an arrow through the chest of one of the men. Bullets crack the rocks around him as he kills another with his pistol. With 2 men dead, the Lakota are able to ride in on the rest. As they do, there are still rifles cracking and bullets shattering on the rocks. Lighthair jumps off his horse to scalp the 2 men he's killed. He grabs the hair of one man and slices the scalp off cleanly. But when he goes to take the second scalp, he's knocked off his feet by a sharp pain in his calf. It's unclear in the sources what causes the injury. He may have been hit by an arrow or by a ricocheting bullet. But his leg is injured and Lighthair is forced to hobble down the hill while the rest of his raiding party finish off the enemy. At the bottom of the hill, the raiding party gathered around Lighthair. They recognized that his brave actions were what made the raid successful. And because of him, they were able to return to their tribe with more resources and horses. They also noticed that despite him being the closest to the enemy, he was only hurt when he went to go take the scalps. Lighthair's wound is treated, and within a few days they were able to make it back to their tribe. Around the campfire, everyone wanted Lighthair to talk about the battle. He had turned the tide, a fearless young man of only about 17 years old. But he refused, and retired to the lodge of his father for the night. Hump then met with the elder Crazy Horse. They agreed that as a Thunder Dreamer, Lighthair had only been injured because he went to take the scalps. He must do what is not expected. He must live a life of humility. Warriors take scalps to boast of their deeds and bravery. It was what they were expected to do. Lighthair himself appeared to have already figured out what his father and Hump were now learning. He had refused to be anything but humble around the campfire. He had shown wisdom, in addition to proving himself in battle. When Lighthair woke the next morning, in the middle of camp, there was already a crowd gathered. At the edge of it was his father, the elder Crazy Horse. Lighthair approached to investigate, and as he did, the people started whispering among themselves. The elder Crazy Horse began singing a song to honor warriors, and the others joined him, including Hump, He-Dog, and Lone Bear. He faced the crowd and spoke of the previous fight, about how his son had proved himself, and how it was time that he took a new name, one of honor and one of his family. Marshall writes in the words of the elder Crazy Horse, quote, "I give my first son a new name this day. I have heard of the brave things he did. I am proud. All of his family and friends are proud of our young man. So this day I give him a new name. I give him the name of his father and his fathers before him. From this day forward, I call him Crazy Horse." End quote. Marshall adds in his own voice, "Crazy Horse." The name flowed like water over rocks. The aftermath of the ceremony is actually my favorite part. The elder Crazy Horse only gives his son his name, and the name of his father's when he has proven that he is worthy of it. That the new Crazy Horse would not dishonor it and would in fact elevate it. As for him, the elder Crazy Horse, he takes a new name, Worm. Marshall writes, quote, Worm, a name of the utmost humility. In time, even that name would have meaning, for he would be known as Worm, the father of Crazy Horse. End quote. The rest of Crazy Horse's life is legend. He'll have a special leadership shirt for a while, but have it taken away when he gets stuck in a love triangle where he doesn't win the girl, but he does get a couple of apology horses after her husband shoots him in the face. He lived, so that's cool. He'll go on to dabble in art, maybe. But most people know him from his leadership in battle. His own people didn't even believe what they were seeing at first. His bravery was dismissed as just bravado of a young man who didn't know any better. But they were wrong. He proved himself again and again in both raids and in battles against the U.S. military. Crazy Horse will die in 1877, stabbed to death by a U.S. soldier while being held back by his own people, just like his vision had suggested. But that's a story for another day.
Thanks for watching the video. I really hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. I have made a story about the Lakota before, in particular, a story from Black Elk Speaks, in which a Lakota man named High Horse tries to win over a girl in his tribe with the help of his friend Red Deer. It doesn't go well, at least at first, but it's a fun story, so check it out.